Hi, everyone. This is Robert Steinman, host of the RPG fan podcast Random Encounter. Had the opportunity to sit in on some roundtable interviews with the developers over at ArenaNet who are making Guild Wars 2. We have two interviews lined up for you. The first one is with Colin Johansson and Eric Flanham. And then the second interview is with ArenaNet founder Mike O'Brien and producer Chris Whiteside. Hope you enjoy.
One question that, just to kind of get the ball rolling here. Mm-hmm. What was one thing that you absolutely positively wanted to desperately change from Guild Wars 1 bringing into Guild Wars 2? The one feature, the one shortcoming that said, I hate this, I gotta get it, we gotta fix this.
You want to start or you want me to? I can. Okay. So, I think where this project started was us looking at making the game more persistent. So we were working on Guild Wars Expansion 4, which was to be our fourth campaign, and we were looking at a lot of radical changes and making the game more persistent. One of the things that people always thought was, well, the reason why you guys are able to not charge a monthly fee for Guild Wars 1 is because you have all this instancing and stuff like that. That actually wasn't true. Our bandwidth costs are distributed differently in that case, but they aren't necessarily lesser. And so one of the things that we were kind of thinking was, well, there's no reason why we couldn't make the game persistent. The reason we chose not to make it persistent was to avoid a bunch of the things like kill stealing and kind of the pain that other people could inflict on you in an MMO. And we started thinking about ways we could get around that, and we started looking at changes that we could make to Guild Wars 1 in order to make that happen. And what ended up happening was the changes that we would have made would have been so radical, as you guys have played the game and what it evolved into, that we didn't want to do that to our Guild Wars 1 fans and sort of go, hey, that game you used to play, it's completely different now. Because we felt like we owed them the ability to keep playing the game that they had fallen in love with and that they kept playing. And so that's really where Guild Wars 2 came out was, we can do lots of great things, but we can't do it without fundamentally changing what the game is. So what we're going to do? We're going to make a sequel, and that game is going to do all of these radical things, and Guild Wars 1 will be left to be Guild Wars 1. So that was really the start of it all. So it was kind of that persistence was I think the big thing. I don't know if you have a...
Yeah, it kind of, I think one of the things that immediately followed that, and it really kind of goes with the persistence, is the content model that you experience in the game. The traditional quest paradigm of you go out, you talk to a guy, you run off, you do stuff, and you come back and get a reward. And unless you are in a group sharing that quest with somebody else, you're not actually playing with other people. You're playing next to other people, and in many cases in an MMO, they're actually making your experience worse. We wanted to find a way to really get around that. And it wasn't a problem we had in Guild Wars 1, but with going into persistence, it was a problem that we needed to face and figure out how to overcome that. And that's where our dynamic event system originated out of, was we can't have traditional quests in our game. They aren't going to work. Let's get rid of them and let's embrace a content type that is one that is inclusive, that builds a sense of community between the players, and actually actively encourages them all to play together as opposed to play alongside one another.
Are there any games that you might have looked at and said they're doing this right? Any
So for me personally, there really weren't. I know there's been a few games, and people kind of assume, those guys, took what Warhammer did or took what Rift did. Those games actually came way after we'd actually started doing this. If there was any game that I would say had this influence, for me at least personally, it was Dark Age of Camelot's Realm versus Realm combat, because there was this sense in that game that everybody had the same goals and that other players didn't hurt you. You always were like, hey, there's more players here. Cool, let's go take that keep down, right? Like more players equals it's easier to take our keep down. And that's kind of where a bunch of that started was that spirit of camaraderie that existed in that game was asking ourselves, can we get that in a PvE environment? Can we make a PvE game that has that spirit in it? It's that sort of thing where you look at team-based shooters, and people play those games, and they don't have to group with the other people. They don't have to like if I go to Team Fortress server, I don't have to talk to someone on Ven. I don't have to group with them to feel like I'm playing with them and having a cooperative experience with them. And so that was, going back again to the thing that Colin said, like a lot of those games, those other cooperative experiences, we kind of looked at and said, a lot of those are PvP oriented, so let's try to get that in this massive space, and let's try to do that with Guild Wars 2. And so, I mean, there's so many different games. I think as you guys play through the game, there's obviously a lot of different games that have influenced us. But I think a lot of those cooperative multiplayer games, like the team-based multiplayer games, we kind of started by looking at that and saying, can we get that same spirit of camaraderie that exists in those games between people who don't know each other? So.
You guys said that you want to do away with the Holy Trinity. It's the tank, the DPS, the healer in MMOs. So now how does that shape the way you guys are creating a character class? Because now you have to make a character class that can do everything at the same time, but you still have to have them feel like an individual, like somebody different. The thief has to play different than the elementalist.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started it was when we first started designing our professions, we knew we didn't want to have that trinity. In particular, because we think it's a barrier to being able to play with other people. Because you get those things where, like, if Colin and I start a game and we're going to duo it, and it has the trinity, one of us is probably going to have to be a healer. Or we're going to be forever looking for that healer. Or one of us is, and most likely one of us is going to have to be a tank, and one of us is going to have to be a healer in order to get that perfect setup. And what ends up happening is, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, I totally experience this in games, is like, well, you have two options. You play a profession that you don't really like, or you play with someone who you maybe don't really like. And it's just like, oh, this is the only healer we could get. This guy's kind of a jerk, but I guess we'll put up with him, right? Like that sort of thing. And so what we instead wanted to do was, again, to look at other game models. It's not true in other games that you can't have a cooperative experience unless you have the tank healer DPS thing. And so that's where that kind of came from. And we started with let's make our characters very versatile. Let's give everybody a set of tools. So the set of tools are things like conditions, the ability to cause conditions, the ability to cause to give boons to other players. And then certain professions have the ability to manipulate those things. And then you combine that with we're going to have knockbacks and stuns and things like that. And then you have to give people creatures that sort of take advantage of that. So you give them things like, you guys will experience this tomorrow when you go into the dungeon. There's going to be a warrior who's this ghost, and he's going to be really hard to fight because he's going to, at some point, lift his sword up in the air and try to heal himself. And if someone doesn't knock him back or stun him or something like that, he's going to be like twice as hard to fight. And the idea is that you spread all these tools around to different players, and then it doesn't become whether or not you have a guy who can tank. It becomes, did we bring the right tools? Does someone have this tool to deal with this situation? So in my mind, one of the big things about our combat that's very different is, in a lot of MMOs, what you do is you have a strategy and you impose that strategy upon every situation you find. You go, here's a monster, tank, healer, DPS it. Exactly this strategy. In our game, what we tried to do is we tried to take that moment where things break down and get a little chaotic, where things aren't working out and you actually have to react to what's going on around you. And that's kind of where we want our combat to live, is in the moment where you have to react to what's going on in the environment. So instead of taking a strategy and imposing it upon the situation, what we do is we try to give you a lot of tools, and then the situation you're in will dictate which tools you should use at which time. That's kind of like a really high-level philosophy on how you do it, but yeah, that's kind of the way we go about our class design. And then to differentiate people, we try to make it so that, and this is a good example, if you have a rocket launcher, a guy with a rocket launcher in a first-person shooter, and a guy with a machine gun, those guys are both doing damage, but they feel very different. So what we said was essentially a thief can do damage and an elementalist can do damage. The important thing is that you feel different when you're doing that damage, and that you, not that you, that one of them shouldn't do damage or the other shouldn't do damage. It's the same way and we applied that to things like tanking. So it's not that a thief can't get in and actually go, hey, you know what, I'm really hard to kill, I'm going to get in your face and you have to deal with me. He does it differently than a warrior does, right? And so that's the idea, is that we try to have these archetypes in the classes feel different. So it's not that they actually can do completely different things. a lot of them have very, very similar tools. It's just the way that they do them feels very different. And hopefully you guys felt that as you saw, hey, that elementalist seems like he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and that guy seems like he's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So about the business model for this game, when the first Guild Wars came up, all the games basically had a monthly fee to pay. Now almost everyone is free to play.
Yep.
So how does Guild Wars 2 stand in this new market? I mean, the business model is basically the same. But.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing for us was we felt like there's the thing that prompted us to make the business model in Guild Wars 1 was that we felt like there's a substantial part of the potential audience that we have that doesn't want that upkeep of paying a monthly fee. Our microtransaction strategy is sort of, and the gem store has sort of evolved as those things have evolved. We still have the philosophy of, and I hope you guys felt this as you played, we don't want the game to be unplayable if you don't buy things. I don't think many of you bought things, and it seemed like people generally had a good time. And so we want to try to always have that be the case, but at the same time, we want to be able to pay our development costs and be able to support the game with a lot of content after we launch, and the way that we can do that is through the microtransactions. So if you want to think of it this way, a lot of free-to-play games kind of get the rap of they're kind of cheap. They don't have they're not AAA titles. So what we do is the box cost is the thing that gets you the AAA title, and then the gem store in our case is the thing that allows us to support the game fully, the way that any game that has a monthly fee would. And then we think that that's a better business model for people, because at the very least, if I'm paying a monthly fee, there's some amount of trust that I have to put in the developer that they're going to give me $15 a month worth of whatever every month. And you're paying that up front, and they might not give it to you. In many cases, they do. There are a lot of games out there that are well worth the subscription that you pay for them. But we feel like with this, it's better for players because they can kind of pick and choose what they want to buy. And it's better for us in that it allows us to remain more agile. So we can do things like, well, we put this thing in, nobody buys it. Obviously, people don't want it, therefore, let's just yank it. Let's try putting things in that people do want. That to me is the thing about the sort of microtransaction models of things, is that they allow players to sort of dictate what is and isn't successful. Whereas with a monthly fee, you basically, your only thing is to unsubscribe from the game and stop playing the game, right, for some period of time. That's how you send the message that I don't like the way that you guys are running this thing after I bought it, that sort of thing. And so we think the microtransaction model is just better for us.
Last night, Rob and I sat with, Christ, I knew I'd forget his name.
Chris.
We sat with Chris, and he talked a lot about that, because we asked him the same question.
Yeah.
And he talked a little bit about it. I asked him, is it kind of like TF2's hats? Because he kept saying it's not pay to win. So do you want to elaborate a little bit more on how the gem store is going to work?
Well, I mean, I think you guys can go in and check this out too, by the way, if you want to. But essentially, what we do is we provide. There's two kind of main categories, and these are things that we sold in Guild Wars 1 as well. The first are, which I think are the least controversial sorts of things, which are just cosmetic things, like fun things, those sorts of things. Like you have town clothes, dyes for your outfits, mini pets, stuff like that. The second thing are things that are time-saving. So they're things that, so for example, in Guild Wars 1, it was possible to, you earn this thing called Balthazar Faction in PvP, and you could use that to unlock skills. But you could also buy skill packs that contained packs of unlocked skills. And so the idea is that you can earn these things eventually in the game. And I think the very important thing, and where I think a lot of people find their kind of distaste of microtransactions, is when we make it so hard to earn the things in-game that it's just, you have to buy them, at the point in which it becomes like, you know what, I really can't play this. And that's a line that we don't want to cross. So if you look, we have things in the store like there are experience boosts, right? But I don't know if we've talked about our philosophy on experience points, is just that we look at experience and your level as being a good measure of progress, but not the end-all, be-all of the game. And so because of that, we have an experience curve that kind of does, like most games, the experience curve kind of does this, if you were graphing it, time spent versus level that you're getting. Ours does this. So what that means is at about level 30, it ramps up in time and gets to, it's about an hour right now, right? It gets to about an hour, which is what feels right based on the amount of content that we have in the game. And it never goes higher than that. And so getting from level 40 to 42, about an hour. Getting from level 70 to 71, about an hour. And so it would be, I think people could rightly be really angry with us if we were claiming, the game's not pay to win. But by the way, it takes 70 hours to level, and we're going to sell you XP boosts, right? But at the point where we're basically saying, you know what XP is? It's a really good progress measure, and if you're really impatient and you just want it sooner, here's a way to boost it. If you're not a college student who has a ton of time, or if you've got a kid or whatever, right? Like a lot of it is kind of the audience and recognizing that some people have a little bit of money that they would rather spend to kind of shortcut time. And then other people have an awful lot of time, and that's one of the important parts of our equation. Is we allow players to trade gold for gems. So a player who and one of the things that we'll do is put all of the stuff in the store that is pretty non-controversial stuff, but you would have had to pay money for, say in Guild Wars 1, like a character slot. Right? We give you a certain number of character slots. If you want more characters, you have to buy a character slot. So with the system we have in Guild Wars 2, it's entirely possible for that college student who's got an awful lot of time but doesn't have any money to go farm gold out of the game, go trade that gold for gems from a player like maybe me, who has money but doesn't necessarily have all the time in the world to dedicate to things, and then we can both kind of get what we want. Right, like I can get some gold, which means that I can jumpstart some of the things that I do, and he can buy character slots with in-game money. And so, we think this is, it's not completely altruistic on our part, right? We're obviously going to make some money on this, but ultimately we think that we're not going to be able to stop people from buying gold. Like, people are always going to buy gold. So it's better for us if some of the players in our game can not turn into professional gold sellers, but can benefit from the people who would buy gold in the game, and to give them a place where they can do it, where they can trade that gold for gems, the place where they can do it where they're not in danger of having their credit card stolen and having their account hijacked and have everything sold off of it and all of that, which is pretty much what happens to you when you buy gold from external sources a lot of times. So this is just kind of us recognizing where we think the market is going and trying to find a solution that allows us to support the game fully and is fair to our players. So the important thing is for people, I think, to look at, try to play the game and not buy anything and see if you're having a good time. If you're having a good time, then I think we've succeeded in our making the game not pay to win. If you feel like you're like, man, I just have to buy all kinds of stuff, then we haven't lived up to our end of the deal. And if that happens, we'll change that stuff, right? Like we're going to be very fast to act on what our fans say. So yeah.
So ideally, you're selling a convenience, not a necessity.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea.
It's also like you've mitigated that a little bit, because in the World v World or in the PvP, by making everybody the same level, you've kind of taken you still have the skills and stuff, but you've kind of put everybody on an even playing field in terms of damage output. Yeah,
again, it's that sort of thing where we didn't, we had Guild Wars 1 and we didn't allow everybody, our competitive PvP players. There was kind of a big outcry from them that they basically just wanted to test skill against skill. They didn't want to test this guy's played this long and so he has this much unlocked, and this guy's played this long. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was we just said, for competitive PvP, we're just gonna even across the board, and people can earn this thing called glory, which acts kind of in two things. You spend it to to gain aesthetic upgrades in PvP, and then the second thing that you do with it is you use it. It kind of determines your PvP rank, so you can compare against other people based on how much glory you've earned, and kind of get a good idea of how you're doing.
Can I get that bear with a monocle? Am I gonna be able to get that?
The bear with the monocle. Where'd you guys see the bear with the monocle?
Colin was bringing it.
Oh,
he was bringing it up, and now it has to be in the
Yeah.
game. It has to be there.
I'm not sure. So we probably will release that as mini pet at some point, but I don't know if we'll ever release it as a ranger pet or anything like that. But
The gentleman bear.
yeah, the gentleman bear. Yeah.
How important do you think story is at this point when you have a case of like when I play Warhammer Online, when I did play Warhammer Online and I'm playing RIP now, I kind of skip over story.
Yeah.
Like at first I try to read it, sometimes it's really engaging
Sure,
and it's
sure.
like, oh wow, that's really funny, but at some point you just want to level
Sure.
and not read all day, not read a book.
Yeah.
But then you have Star Wars where I have all these quests and some of them are a bit repetitive, like, go kill 15 Jawas. Well, I don't want to necessarily have a 15 or 5 minute conversation about killing Jawas. So where do you find that middle ground?
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to help find that middle ground is to offer the player choice so that they can do what they want to do. We have built with our personal story a really diverse, really in-depth story that constantly branches and changes as you go through the game. But you don't have to do it if you don't want to. We built this dynamic event system to fill the open world with all this content that players can go out and do, and they can play events, and they can fill renown hearts, and they can go after skill points. And you guys didn't even get to see these today, but there are jumping puzzles and little mini dungeons scattered all over the maps that you can go off and do and find treasure chests at the end and other rewards. And the world is just filled with all of this content out there, so you as a player have a choice to do what you want to do to level up. You can go to World versus World PvP and level from level 1 to 80 entirely in there if you want to, and you never have to play your story. You never have to do events if you don't want to. And the idea there is we believe that there are people who fundamentally are looking for a role-playing game that they can play with their friends. And our personal story will offer them the top-of-the-line RPG experience, except they can bring all their friends along with them, have that personal story, and then experience this gameplay out in the open world with other players as well. And then we believe that there are people who are looking for this large open world experience, and they really aren't that interested in story, and it's not as important to them. And so the rest of the game is available to them, and they don't have to do that if they don't want to. And if at some point they decide, hey, I'm actually now really interested in their story, they can go back and at level 40 go back and start playing the story from the very beginning if they want to, and start leveling up through that. And the story steps are all basically assigned a level of difficulty to them, and the game level adjusts you down to the level of the story step. So you can always go back and have it be entertaining for you if you way out leveled it and then decided you want to go do your story. I think a couple of the core design decisions we made are also taking into account that aspect that some people just don't want to have to read all this stuff. And it's something that we've seen a lot in traditional MMOs is you get a quest and you go up and you get this giant wall of text. You're just like, no, I know what's going to happen. It's going to be collect 10 things. I just click accept and go do it. And we've really tried to kill that mandatory text that you have to read anywhere in the game. Instead, anytime you guys were doing an event, hopefully you saw that you just walked into it, you saw what was going on, and you just started playing. And there are characters in the world shouting voice dialogue at you, like, help my farm's under attack, or help the centaurs took over the garrison. We tried to replace all that written dialogue by making it more immersive so that you hear people talk, and they're using voice dialogue to tell you the things that are going on in the world, and then you visually see them and experience them, so you're drawn into it more as opposed to having to read what the story is.
Yeah. That was actually the birth of the event system, was our desire to, like personally, I used to read all of the quest tests. Like when I played EverQuest 1, I read everything. When I first started playing WoW, I started reading everything. And eventually you get to the point where the game is telling you not to read stuff because really who's going to keep track of 30 things at once? Or 20 things, and it starts getting overwhelming. And so the game is communicating to you, hey, don't read me. We're not important individually. We're important in aggregate. So for the most part, you can get away in WoW with kind of just ignoring a bunch of stuff, or in games like that. Guild Wars 1 was like this too. But occasionally there's this really cool, a bit of content that you're going to miss if you skip everything. And at least for me, who's a player who I like to read things when they're cool, and once they're kind of not very interesting, I kind of would prefer to not read them, but it's hard to know if every time you read something, the majority of it is not very cool. And plus, us as developers, we work on all of this stuff. we don't want to write a bunch of text that nobody's going to read. We put a lot of effort into that text.
It's demoralizing.
At the end of the day, yeah. At the
Sit in a
end
room,
of
write a
the
whole bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
no one's going to read
at
it.
the end of the day, that's us wasting our time. We could put our time into something else.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we inherently just said, so there have to be bread and butter like simple tasks to do in an MMO, because MMOs, when people play them, they expect a bunch of stuff to do. But we also want cool story moments. So what we should do is just take those things and make a piece of content that's really good at the story thing, and make a piece of content that's really good at the thing you do over and over again. And that's kind of where the dynamic events and the little renowned hearts come from. On the one hand, those are the things that are good at delivering that, like, you don't have to read, you just walk into the area, you do stuff, you get rewarded for it. And then we have the personal story, which is there are cutscenes, all that stuff. And then the other thing that we decided was, we don't want to make, as Colin said, we don't want to make you have to play the thing that you don't want to play. We think that most players will prefer to kind of bounce around and play different things, but there are obviously a lot of people. Our lead systems designer, Isaiah, for example, we take it as a major victory in our story that he knows any of our story, because he's one of those players who he just clicks through things. And we know that both of those, and at the same time, there's players who are going to read every single line of text that every NPC says, and they're going to savor it and try to register it in their heads. And we want both of those players to be happy playing our game. So,
well, just to put in my question, I didn't want to ask it as first question.
sure.
But you had a small team devoted to research for a console version.
Mm-hmm.
How's that working out for you?
It's still research at this point, so it's.
You won't be at E3 announcing.
No, we won't be at E3 announcing anything. We're always looking as a company at trying new things, looking at where we can branch out. We have R&D teams that do all kinds of different things. That's still just an R&D thing. I know there's always the fear that we're going to dumb the game down or something like that by players, or that we're
feels a
going to
little
alter
bit
it.
like The Witcher 2, because when it came out, it totally felt console ready, and now it's out for console and it's really good.
Yeah. I think we'd have an awful lot of things to do if we wanted it to be on console. I think that's one thing our R&D has shown us. But yeah, we're not even close to talking about that.
No secret DS version yet that we.
No, there's no secret DS. A DS version would be awesome.
Damn it!
If we could make that work. Yeah.
Just speed the cinematic.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it could do that. So, but yeah, it's still at the point where it's a really small team and it's all just R&D.
So it's a 3DS version.
Yeah.
It's the Kinect, and you do it all handily.
Don't make that joke
Sort your
now.
inventory with Kinect.
It's actually a Jaguar version. We really believe that that's going to make a comeback.
You guys had the Kinect set up in your game room, and I thought about taking a picture of that, posting it on Facebook. Kinect Guild Wars 2 confirmed, first report out there.
Just get a picture of somebody running, getting their character going.
The dynamic.
Shop the screen and do it. Yeah.
Can you tell us something about the mobile companion app? Are you working on this?
We are still working on it. The things that I could tell you are things that we have talked about before, which are really broad. We have the ability for the app to communicate back and forth within the game. So I think a couple of years ago we showed the ability to have your friends list on your phone and be able to see where your friends are in the game and on the mini map and things like that. We're still not ready to announce exactly how that stuff's going to work, but it is something that we're actively looking at.
Eric said we have R&D teams. That's the kind of stuff.
That's another one of those things. Yeah.
Like having a crafting app would be kind of awesome.
That would
When you're on
be-
the bus,
That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
theoretically.
We finally got to see the dynamic events work, and I know for me that was you guys have been talking about dynamic events ever since you announced the game, and we're all sitting here a little cynical of that, and we've seen it work. It's a really cool experience to suddenly see everybody rushing to, again, kill the centaurs. But now, how do you make it so that those dynamic events, 80 hours into the game, am I going to have to keep going because someone poisoned the water hole again? Am I going to have to keep going and doing that, or do you guys plan on going in and freshening up those events with monthly updates or something, or is there a thought process there?
Yeah, there's really kind of two answers to that, and the first one is as you progress through the game, the structure of events and the story of events and the story of the world changes drastically. So it shouldn't feel like you're always putting out poison that is in the water supply everywhere. You know,
Sure.
as you progress through the storyline and the maps in the game, you should feel like you're doing completely different things that fit with the story and the region that you're in, and they should become more epic in scale as you progress through the game to a certain degree as well. And you know that's a big part of it, is making sure that the stuff that you're doing in the game doesn't feel repetitive across all the dynamic events as you keep playing. But they will repeat again. You know, every event chain progresses and moves back and forth down the chain so that content can happen again. And one of the things that we're going to do is, as you asked about, you know, when the game comes out, we are going to have a large dedicated live team supporting Guild Wars 2 from the day it ships. We view this as more than just a game. You know, when you make an MMO, you're making a service. You're making something that, you know, people expect to be supported, and you need to be there day one ready to support it and expand on that experience. And the event system is the perfect vehicle for us to do that with. It's a really great thing so that we can take the opportunity to, you know, have content that suddenly appears in the map that wasn't there before, and all of a sudden the stuff that used to happen there happens less frequently. So each character you play through the game, you might see less stuff, you know, completely new stuff.
A really great example is so that initial bandit burning field, the field that you guys are in. There's two events that happen there, right? There's the big worm queen, and there's the bandits that come burn the field. If we were like a normal quest-based MMO, it would be very hard for us to add content in that area without it kind of stepping on the other content that's already there. With a dynamic event, I don't know, we could add things like, if we decided that the Skrit who you saw later, we were going to have an event where the Skrit actually tunnel up and start stealing all of the feed, or try to steal the cows or whatever. We could totally do that, and it would be a matter of making sure that those things, the other things, happen less often, and this other new thing happens. And we absolutely intend to keep the world fresh and alive by adding things like that all the time. So that's part of that dedicated live team that Colin talked about. And again, going back to the you know, the gem store and all that, part of that is that's what allows us to do that, is making that additional income and having a big team that can support it.
All those personal story options and everything that are in the game. We realize people are going to make a lot of different characters and play through the game to see all the different storylines, and we want to make it so that experience feels as unique and different every time you play through as possible. And the more different events you encounter, the more that's going to happen. A year ago, that bandit field only had bandits burning the crops, and now there's a giant worm queen and bandits that happen there. So that's an example of just within a year of getting more events that rotate in that area.
Cool.
10-minute warning.
Okay.
In Guild Wars 1, one of the big achievements for any guild was getting their own guild hall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was their base of operations / you know, personal PvP map and that sort of thing. Are we going to see something like this in Guild Wars 2? Is it going to be expanded so that, you know, your guild basically has its own little fief? You know, is there going to be basically sort of player housing, that sort of thing?
So I think I can answer that. So yes, at some point. We can't exactly say or commit to when that will be. The big thing about guild halls is we wanted to, I think we've mentioned this before, and the same thing goes for mounts and things like that as well. We don't want to do them unless we can do them right. We kind of have that philosophy of, if we want to do something with Guild Wars 2, we don't want to kind of do it halfway. We want to do it really well, and we want to do it super polished and good. And so we didn't have time to do sort of a guild hall thing or player housing or any of that, but we fully intend to have that, have those things in the future. So yeah, can't quite say when, but it'll be coming at some point.
One thing guilds can do, and I think that this is kind of the big thing that they get to experience early on as a big guild, is in World versus World PvP, when you take control of keeps, guilds can actually claim control of that keep as the one who did it. So if you and your guild work together, you can take a keep and you hang banners on it that show your guild's banner, and your name shows up so everyone can see that your guild is the one who did that. So when you're out there fighting for the pride of your server and your world, you get an opportunity for your guild to show off to everybody, this is what we did.
Yeah, and I don't know if you took a look at the guild panel very much, but if you go in there, you'll see that you earn a currency called influence as you do things with your guild. And influence is used to, the guild leader can go to kind of a civilization-style tech tree and research different things and do things like, things that you can get are like, you can get a banner that has your guild symbol on it that gives an experience boost to anybody who touches it. So not just people in your guild, but other people. So you can, if you want to be a really social guild and go, hey, look how cool we are, here's an experience banner for everybody, you can do that. There's things like feasting tables that have all kinds of silly things that you can interact with, that you can go, hey, let's have a guild party, here's a feasting table, and you use your influence to get those things. By that same token, there are also things that you can buy in World versus World. So once you've claimed a keep, you can do things like boost the amount of XP your guild members get, or anybody gets, when they're fighting around your keep. You can do things like make the guards more powerful, all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of that guild influence symbol system is really flexible in that we can always add new things to the tech tree. We can always give you new things to spend that influence on. And so there are a lot of things that you can buy initially, but we do plan to add constantly to what guilds can do together there as well.
I have one question about the dynamic events. It's more like 3 questions, but
Okay.
I'll try and simplify it. Because of the main story, the dynamic events seem to be the branching path of the game. So far, I don't feel like I've made a choice in the main story. But as far as how they branch, what's the process of that like developing, at what tier of the event? Because I know that I've failed to save a farmer, but then I still had to defend, his farm. And I cleared that. But how does it go? Like, how do you guys break down, like, well, this is what's going to happen if this isn't achieved? And will that be modified sort of to follow on Rob's question later on in the future, depending on how people approach dynamic events?
I think we approach them on a event chain by event chain basis, and we take it based on what is the story of this area, what is the story that we want to achieve with this area, and what makes sense here. So if it's a castle that centaurs come and attack the castle, what would make sense going into this? Would the centaurs set up catapults before they tried to take over the castle? All right, then we need to have an event where there's a group of centaur siege masters who come down, and you can intercept them. And if you don't intercept them, they set up the catapults, and then they start bombarding the town. And that's what triggers the attack to kick off. And now a new event kicks off where the attack comes, and there's a secondary event going where the catapults are set up, and you can blow those up. And then if they take the town, what events should be running that trigger off of that? Well, they would take the people in the town captive, so they should take those people back, put them in prison, and there should be a rescue event to get those people back, and another event to get the town back, and another one to wipe out the catapults that are still guarding the area. And that stuff just kind of branches out and turns into like, okay, well, narrative-wise, what makes sense? Now, here are all the events that fill this area in the order that they kind of tie in together.
It's actually probably harder to stop doing events than to do them. A lot of the chains just kind of suggest more events to themselves, right?
Yeah,
So,
and certainly it will be very easy for us to keep expanding on those chains. There are often times we're like, okay, we have to stop. We're going to work on this event chain forever if we don't go do something else. So
Yeah.
there's certainly a lot of opportunity to do that. In regards to the personal story branching, I think early in the game, the big branches that you experience are your biography choice that you make, where you say, this is who my character is. That affects kind of the first 2 core storylines that you experience in the game. So that's where that first real branching happens, is when you make
Right
a
off the
character.
bat. Okay.
And then the second one happens about level 6 to 8 in each one of the different races in your first storyline. You're going to get a choice that you pick between 2 options, and that branches your story and sends it in 2 different directions that change the ending of that very first story.
yeah.
arc.
So what was the storyline basically that you were on with your?
I went with the human engineer who lost her sister.
Okay.
Colin actually saw me finishing up like a quest line, and I was like, I'm gonna roll a new character and see what that intro is like. But I was at a point, I think he said, where the consequences of my choices were about to like become fruitful.
Yeah, the sister one was going to start paying off. And then were you a noble, commoner, or streets? Commoner? Okay. So you had you had Petra and you had Andrew, and you got to deal with all the bands and everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the big choice in that one's Orphanage Hospital.
Well, I guess I take it back. Yeah, because
You chose which of those to save. So if you were to go back to that instance, that's your home instance. Which one did you pick?
I went and took care of the kids.
Took care of the kids. Okay. So let's say. So if you go back, what would end up happening is that hospital will be demolished in your home instance, and you would see all of the soldiers are having to take care of that. If you had made the opposite decision, the orphanage would be completely destroyed, and the kids would be all out. Not to mention the things that you do in those 2 different things are completely different. So you went on a completely different mission than you otherwise would have gone on. Had you made the opposite choice. So
Yeah, I will back that a little. I totally forgot about that. But
no, totally. It's a lot of times it's hard to know when you've made a choice because you don't necessarily see what would have happened had you done the other thing.
Does anyone have one last question?
What do you guys have against centaurs? Like, seriously.
They're just
a great example.
I have a real quick artsy question. You guys are obviously, I mean, there's nothing but art everywhere all around the studio. You guys obviously are focusing heavily on art design. And that's really apparent when I made a character. I made an engineer, and that was steampunk, and I made a necromancer, and that necromancer basically looked like Alice in Wonderland. He cast Dead Space necromorph spells. How important is the art direction to making people identify with their characters?
Good question.
Oh, I think that's absolutely important. I think one of the things that has driven the game, we're a much more art-driven studio than I think a lot of studios are. We work really closely with our artists to try to build a very unique world. Like we've got a lot of things in our world that exist only because someone did a piece of concept art about it. And especially when it comes to the professions, a lot of the professions will describe what we kind of want. We'll talk to them about it. They'll do a piece of concept artwork, and a lot of times it will change. We'll go, okay, well, we should change this. Like I think the Guardian, for example, got his spirit weapons because Kekai did an awesome picture of like. Of a Guardian that had this ghostly hammer in back of him, and we were like, okay, that's a new category of skills for the Guardian, right? Like the mesmer shattering effect is purely like again Kekai, who's one of our main, he did this piece of concept artwork of a female human mesmer, like where she's got this mirror behind her that's shattering, and we're like, okay, well, can we do that? And we then go to our technical artists, and they're like, yeah, I think we could figure out a way to like, we'll turn the character into 2D plane, and then we'll shatter the plane and all of that, and so it really, really like one of the things that's really important to us is kind of immersing the character in the world, and we think the art design is a huge part of that. So it's massive, like as far as just how much like art means to us at the studio, and how much from a gameplay standpoint we look at for art for inspiration and back and forth. So
it pervades even in the UI too, where you're if you find yourself playing the game and looking where your eyes are, you're almost always drawn to the middle of the screen. And if you look at when you're doing a traditional MMO, you're usually watching the outside where all the UI elements are, and they're moving up and down. You're constantly tracking all that stuff, and that's a conscious decision to get the art to really draw you in and make it feel like the UI is part of the game world, so it isn't something that you're just focused on the outside, but you're actually looking at the art in the world.
Can we get your names and titles just for this? We didn't beginning.
I'm Colin Johansson. I'm the lead content designer.
Eric Flanham, I'm the Guild Wars 2 lead designer.
Cool. I'm going to steal the ball from you right now.
Okay.
So, you guys need to introduce myself again. I'm Mike. You guys know me. I'm the studio head of ArenaNet. And we've got Chris Whiteside, the senior producer on Guild Wars 2.
Well, here, softball question to start with.
Okay.
Is there going to be another E3 for Everyone event this year?
No, there's not. Yeah. So, I mean, people who want to get in the game know how to get in the game at this point, right? First of all, you can guarantee yourself access to the game by pre-purchasing it. And secondly, we'll of course have ways that people can win spots in the betas and stuff like that. So since we're already in such an open format, that basically has it covered.
Chris, you were telling us the other night that you came into the development cycle kind of late. I think it was like 10 months ago.
That's correct.
So what has that transition been for you? I mean, your experience was like primarily racing games. It seems like you've made every racing game of the last 14 years, or at least you have a credit on most of them.
Yep.
So how has the transition been into this large-scale MMO?
One word: awesome. I mean, like I said last night, all my life I've played MMOs, nearly every single one, I think. And I never really thought I would get the opportunity in my career because I had kind of been pigeonholed and mentored in driving games and later on in action games. But, luckily for me, I also got to have, by accident, a lot of experience in setting up studios and that kind of thing. So I think in terms of coming here, it's been, I think Mo would agree with this. For me, it's been very nerve-wracking. I'm very vocational, and so it was a very, I had to think very clearly about taking on this challenge, because once I set my sights on something, it's all about getting the very best out of the team, and I don't like letting anyone down. And a company this big, with a challenge this big in terms of how much the company pioneers, sets up a lot of challenges, and so I think overall for me it's been, Mo's been very supportive. It's a fantastic team. Most of my time has been catching up to their level of experience in this area, and then doing my absolute best for them to service them properly so that they can do the best job that they can. So, I always love to be hit by challenges, and I'm really proud to be part of this team. And it's an exciting journey, and every day I just want to make sure that I'm doing the best I can so these guys can do the best job they can.
Great. I have a question about the development of this entire project, because I also, as you were speaking about last night, NCSoft is more or less backing the project with a very passive, hands-off focus, just be creative. Is that more difficult than having, deadlines and having to deliver builds or anything? Is pressure from yourself more pressure than pressure from a publisher?
Certainly, it is the case that we're always our, harshest critics, and we, drive hard, to make a great game. NCSoft is a great company to be part of, right? Because NCSoft is development driven right from the top. TJ Kim, CEO of NCSoft, is super passionate gamer and game developer by trade. And the kind of feedback he gives us is very ambitious feedback, right? Is very, go be the best in the industry at this kind of feedback. And then, leaves it to us to define what is the best in the industry and how are we going to rise to that challenge. But everybody at ArenaNet is here because we have this singular vision, right? We love online worlds. We want to take online worlds to a new place that they haven't been before. And we want to make, an industry-changing online world. We really want to, offer players that experience of the truly dynamic online world that they've dreamed about but they haven't seen before. And so, as you said, as you guessed, we are our harshest critics in making sure that we're living up to that standard. Another
part of that is also, nothing comes for free, and so, with Guild Wars 1, the original crew on that, and the founders and Mo, they had to earn the right to be able to be this creative and have this much freedom purely from a development point of view. But before I came here, and certainly since I've been here, we promote a very collaborative kind of environment. But the cool thing about it is that it's not internalized. We make sure that the collaborative environment spans as much as NCSoft as possible, whether it's TJ or his groups in terms of metric assessment or quality assessment or fun assessment. And so everyone is basically, instead of it being like, well, this better be great or you're in big trouble, it's kind of like, just how far can we push things? And then I guess the second thing that I wanted to talk about, which is really interesting that Mo and I kind of joke about and ponder on every so often, is, coming here and having worked on a lot of console games where you are time confined and there are a very limited set of expectations that you have to hit. You're thinking more about how much quality can we get in the time that we have. That's definitely part of what we're doing here, but then also because the team is made up of like crazy developers who are really good at what they do, there has to be a tempering between, iteration to get it to the very best it can be, but not at the cost of other areas of the game or the cost in terms of the how that affects team members and so on. So that's definitely something that I've had to learn more about of, basically iteration's a great thing, but how do we get better at it? So it's a fantastic position to be in, but like we were talking about last night, it really is, it's all up to us, and it's all up to how much drive we have and just how much we want to exceed the expectations of our community and so on. So there is a lot of pressure, yeah. Good pressure.
Okay, because you're working up to release, what do you expect to sell according to numbers, and when will you be satisfied?
Well, we're not going to make numeric sales forecasts for you, but in terms of when we'll be satisfied, we'll be satisfied when Guild Wars 2 is the #1 MMO.
In active players? Or what is the most successful MMO? What defines the most successful MMO?
Okay, I'll define it more broadly than that. Certainly all those things are good, and we'd like to be all those things. But really, any MMO is in it for the long run, and we are in this for the long run, right? So we're making an online world that we want people to enjoy so much that they bring their friends into and hang out. Year after year, as we introduce new content to the game, we've got so many things that we can introduce into the game that we're excited to just keep driving this living world. And I think that I think our biggest challenge right now is, of course, Guild Wars 2 is kind of a very new and different game, and getting the word out about anything new and different is always challenging, and that's where you guys all come in, right? Is you guys have to help us get the word out, right? Like, obviously, obviously you've heard about our manifesto video and how we're saying that we're new and different, and you probably came here today wondering, is the game really what they say it is in their manifesto video? And hopefully after playing it, you've seen, yeah, it really is what we say it is in our manifesto video. But all the customers are going to think the same thing, right? All the potential customers, they're going to think, I don't know, everybody uses big language about their games. Is this really, is this really a groundbreaking game? And we got to get the word out to them. And I think it's going to be you guys, it's going to be word of mouth, it's going to be all those things to really try to get people to understand that we really are doing something new and different. And we really are creating an online world that's a truly living, dynamic online world for them to enjoy. Once they enjoy that, I think the sky's the limit. I think that players will come to Guild Wars 2. I think that any online world, it has the networking effect. You want to play because it's a great world, and you want to play because your friends are there. And I think people will bring their friends to Guild Wars 2. We kind of, certainly hope that all of our fans right now that are following us, all the hundreds of thousands of people who are going to play this coming weekend, are also our advocates, are also going out to their friends and saying, hey, there's something new you ought to check out. Come check it out. And so, I'm not going to judge, is it sales in the first year, or is it, active user base in the first year or whatever. But I think we've got something. I mean, honestly, hey, I get to say this because I'm the studio head, right? But honestly, I think we've got something. I think players are going to see it. I think that dynamic events are just a way better content model than people have experienced before. I think, breaking down all the barriers to being social, really bringing people together is way better than people have experienced before. And, we're in it to win it this time. We were number 2 last time behind World of Warcraft, but I want to be number 1 this time.
So you're going to be the World of Warcraft beer that everybody is waiting for?
I don't know. Everybody keeps using the word World of Warcraft killer. I don't know. That's
WoW beater.
yeah.
Wow, beater. Well,
Wow, Peter.
Right.
Wow, well, I think you guys are definitely confident about your product, and I
Right.
really like this one approach that you have, which is you still don't have a release date,
Yeah.
but you're saying, all right, you reserve the game. Here's a free weekend for you to
Yeah.
have it in your hands, and it gives you guys a chance to get feedback from the people about what you're making, and I think that shows a tremendous level of confidence. So now, when you get the feedback from the player base, what do you do then? Do you sit down and go through page after page of forum? We were talking about this earlier today. Do you go through page after page and look for everything, or how do you sift through that information?
Yeah. So let me finish the previous
Sure.
thought, and then I'll get right to that. So, you were asking me, are we going to be the WoW beater, or are we going to be the WoW killer? And I was just going to say, everybody uses the term WoW killer, and come on, nothing is going to kill WoW other than WoW, right? Games don't just I'm dead, But in terms of do gamers, right? Do gamers honestly believe that we've seen the most popular game that will ever exist, and nothing ever will be more popular than that? I don't think anybody really believes that. And so, I don't think people have to phrase it in that black and white term, like something has to kill WoW or else. I think that there has been a progression, and yes, 1 has been on the top of the heap for 7 years now, and that's a long time to be on the top of the heap. But I think there's been a progression in our industry of being able to make games that attract more and more players. And I have very high sights for how many players we can attract to Guild Wars 2. And to answer your question, how do we take on feedback? I was actually just talking about this in a previous interview, and I said, somebody was asking me if there is a procedure that we use to take on feedback. And I said, no, it's not procedure, it's philosophy, right? And so it's kind of how we build our company, right? Like, our company is a very iterative company. When we build games, actually the very first thing that we do when we develop a game is we make it multiplayer playable. We make it so it patches itself, every time somebody runs a new build. We do like 20 new versions of our game a day. Then we start layering in game mechanics, and we say, what's fun, what's not fun, and we constantly tweak the game according to what's working in the game. And so as we do that, we bring in external testers, right? So we've had alpha testers in Guild Wars for I don't know how long, a long, long time right now, and they play 20 new versions of the game a day. And then, they're constantly telling us, oh, I'm loving this new thing. This is so great, but this other thing, I just don't get it. I don't see what it's supposed to be. And it's like, oh, that's a problem that they're not getting this. We're gonna capitalize on that. And then the more we get, the more we're able to talk about the game in public and go broad, the more we can start to really get broad feedback from lots of players, right? And so everybody in this company, we've all been trained, reading alpha forums for years now. We all kind of, obviously those of us who have been in the industry forever, we kind of know what you get and what you don't get out of forum feedback. You get a lot of complaining and you have to have thick skin, and, but everybody at this company really learns that everybody reads the forum feedback all the time. And we get to a point where it's like, there's a news article. One of you guys writes a news article, and then there will be, 50 replies to your news article. We read through them, and we want to see what are people saying about this. And so we really try to get ourselves in that mindset of we're providing a service to customers, right? And you can't be totally slave to it, because you have to have this core vision of the game, and you have to understand these are our design pillars, and every decision is going to match the design pillars. But if there's something customers just aren't getting in the game, why aren't they getting it? And, what do we need to do to make it more clear? Or maybe that system just isn't as fun as we thought it was, and we should, how can we adapt that system to make it more fun? So we really develop that way throughout the entire life cycle of the game, which is why it becomes, kind of second nature once the game is released to keep developing that way.
And it's the second nature of it whereby we're able to, not always, but able to predict what might be coming up. So we'll go through things and we'll see something mentioned the first time, and because we're very close to the product, the game, the world, we'll basically see that, and because we have experience in it, we'll look at it and go, okay, this is something we should flag and watch out for and start preparing for, and then if we see it more, then we're kind of always ready. So I would say, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, a lot of what we see, we're prepared for, because we have this kind of like symbiotic relationship with our alpha players and the community as a whole, including, websites and so on. And so we try and stay ahead of things. But we're also very cognizant of, something comes up, sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees, something comes up, and if we think it's serious, we deal with it in a prompt and a high quality way, and get it out as quickly as possible, to then gauge feedback and iterate on that appropriately to get it to the point where, it reaches the same level and exceeds market expectations along with the subset of our other features. So,
when you say that you must spread the word about how groundbreaking this game is, are you planning some free trial version, free weekends, some way to let people experience the game?
So I think we'll get into that kind of thing after we release the game. Like right now, we've got our work cut out for us, and we're focusing on, getting this game out to all the customers who are eagerly awaiting it. And then after we've gotten, after we've released the game, we'll turn to are people understanding, are people getting the word out, and what do we need to do, additionally to get the word out.
I think that goes back to the question from you earlier about, what does success mean to us? That's a really fascinating question, and the way I was thinking about that is, it's difficult to put a number behind that because there's a lot of steps before you start talking numbers. And specifically, for me, success is when we reach a critical mass whereby we have so much investment and so much interest in the game and so much immersion that we're then able to turn that energy and continue to propel us up the mountain in terms of how many people we actually have in our world. And that's kind of a little bit about what you were mentioning too. It's, we're definitely taking it to a certain point, and we're doing everything we can to meet and exceed expectations and create a truly fantastic world that no one's ever experienced before. But the game only starts, basically, or the world only starts when we go live, and so we need to get to that point where we have this critical mass of people that really do care about what we're doing, and then embrace that more. And it's at that point that it really will propel us in terms of people, exposure of the game, people talking about it, people saying what they really want, and being able with many elements of our game to say, well, okay, we've come this far. What is it that's you really like about this? What's really special? What can we do to build on this, and what can we do better? And I think one of the reasons we're very confident about the work that we do, not necessarily how great the game is, but we're confident about the work that we do because we do have a support network, and that support network's our community. The only thing that keeps me up at night and really worries me is that we let that support network down. We can't afford to do that, and so that's key to making this world something special, and always has been.
I mean, and particularly you'll be able to speak to this to a degree because this is your first company where you're working on an MMO.
Yeah. And
obviously, racing fans, first-person shooter fans, they're very vocal about whether they like the game or not.
Yeah.
But nowhere is that more important than an MMO's longevity. And how would you define the typical MMO player as far as the community? I mean, sorry, I'm having trouble with this question.
Okay.
As far as the community feedback and how important they are, I mean, they're almost like a third game developer, like that's always and constantly in the room. Because you could ship a first-person shooter or a racing game, it could be complete crap. And sometimes, you see games that come out where they're just trying to hoodwink people into buying them. There's some movie-based games that do that.
Yep, and I've worked on one of those at least recently.
We don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
Has that been alarming for you, though? Transition to an MMO where it's like immediate?
It's actually something that I was looking for. So, working... So if I could talk a little bit about what it's like to develop almost in isolation and with console games, I think that, one of the big things working console games is, get focus tests in, get 10 people in for 3 days to tell you how good or not your game is, I mean, that doesn't really cut it. But because I've always been a big fan of online games and online worlds, one of the key things for me in terms of being a developer and really wanting to change the way that people interact with games and so on was to work in an atmosphere whereby you do have, for want of a better word, this symbiotic relationship where you really do have that third developer there. And I'd always been wanting to basically get to that point because, for a very long time I was a game designer. I learned very quickly the importance of that games aren't necessarily, it's what you want to make and therefore everyone's going to like it, you know what I mean? When you make a game, you're providing a product to a client that you're essentially building it for them, when you're doing that almost in isolation in certain types of business models, it can be very difficult because once the game launches, there's not really that much you can do about it. You've had your one shot and there's your sales and you think, okay, well, I wish that we'd done that better, and that's why there's a lot of sequelization and franchise fatigue that comes from that. So coming here, for me, one of the big reasons for wanting to work in an MMO environment, or as I prefer to call it, an online world environment, anywhere where there's a massive amount of players connected to the business model in the world, is the power and the kind of creative power and the iterative power that brings along with it. There are a lot of advantages to it. It's not easy making these kind of games, but to the same extent, if you're able to create the infrastructure and the tools to be able to really get good feedback regularly and to respect that, and the team respects it, then wow, you've got a really powerful tool, and it gets to the point where literally it's not like we listen to every single thing. There are some things that we look at and we're like, well, maybe that's not us, that's not the game we're making. But there are other things that are very clear to us where we're going, the customer is clearly saying to you, this is not what we were expecting, or we expect something better. So we're like, okay, well, that's great. We'll get that fixed and we'll make it better. So that is a huge advantage that we have in this space. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we have such a vocal and passionate community, because they actually see the changes take place based on what they've said and their opinions and so on. So I guess in short, it was something I always wanted to be able to be part of. It wasn't necessarily something that I thought I would get the opportunity to do, but I'm very happy to be here and working with Mo and the rest of the team. So yeah, it's cool. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I would also say, in short, yes, the community basically is the other developer in the room.
Yeah.
Take out your crystal balls, guys.
Yeah.
5 or 6 years down the line,
Yeah.
are you thinking that ArenaNet is going to basically be known as those Guild Wars guys, or are there new genres, new IPs, new areas that you want to explore and say, we've created these new worlds and we've had a lot of fun. Let's create a new world that's something different than anything we've done previously.
Well, we're certainly not going to stop innovating now. And so I think ArenaNet will be known as those online worlds guys, because we're all here because we're passionate about online worlds. But we will continue to invest heavily in Guild Wars 2, and in addition to that, I'm sure we'll get to the point where we are working on other online worlds as well. But right now, ArenaNet is all about Guild Wars 2.
Colin and Eric in the first interview in here were talking about you guys are going to have a very large team devoted to, after the game comes out, producing content and keeping this product moving for however long its lifespan is. What do you guys see as like the core parts of making sure to keep players coming back to Guild Wars? They've hit level 80 with a couple characters. They've seen a bunch of storylines. How do you keep them coming back to keep playing the game?
Well, I think there's a couple broad areas that you need to do. First of all, an online world needs to be supported, from month to month, basically, right? And so, you look at what we did with Guild Wars 1, where we're constantly introducing new events, holiday events, or a new storyline into the game. We just need to keep the world fresh so that there's always something going on, something to talk about, something new to experience for people who are enjoying the game. And then second, of course, we will follow up with more major updates also, where we'll introduce big new features into the game, or raise the level cap, or all those kinds of things.
Cool. And then we're always going to want to continue to pioneer as well. So, if you get the ArenaNet bug and you like what you see today and you think that some things are really quite innovative, then we're not going to stop. You know what I mean? We're building a foundation. We're building the beginning of a world, the genesis of a world, if you like, built upon key things like the importance of community, the importance of pioneering and innovation. We're not just going to take what we have and go, okay, well, we'll just basically create ancillary content on top of that. We're going to continue to try and break through boundaries and always exceed expectations. So it's super exciting. And talking about crystal ball, that's a fascinating question, because for us, Mo and I talk about it a lot of what are we excited about and so on. The interesting thing for us is it's difficult really to have a crystal ball, because we're as a company we drive forward, and because we're driving forward, it's difficult to predict on top of what we're already doing without looking too much to what other people are doing. So it's an interesting question.
Can we do one more question? One sure.
Both of you do it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, mine's sort of a follow-up on this. You're talking about continuing to innovate and everything. Guild Wars 2 is built on some gameplay systems that are new to the MMO world, or at least they're drawn from successful single-player experiences. Are there things that haven't yet to be implemented that you would like to introduce later in expansions or DLC, brand new gameplay systems, or are we just talking about like a new storyline?
Sorry, I'll answer it if you like. I mean, it's up to you.
I think your question is asking us to predict what major updates we're going to do to the game.
I guess I'm more curious about if there's anything that's being cut currently because it doesn't work right now, but it's a really great idea that at some point you'd like to be finessed and implemented.
I can answer that.
Okay.
First of all, we never cut anything. we always backlog. Secondarily, I'm not aware, unless Mo is, of any system or function that we've ever not basically got to the point where we feel that it is ready for public consumption. So, unless I'm wrong, I'm sure that in the ideation period there have been some areas of the product that were sidelined and so on. But there's nothing since I've been here which we haven't basically managed to problem solve and go forward with. And then I'll just preface before Mo talks about what does that mean for the future. Well, we're kind of, there's the adage of, and I know this because I was very addicted to MMOs. There's one thing being addicted to playing MMOs. There's another thing being addicted to developing online worlds. And I don't think we're ever going to lose that addiction. The big addiction for us is that we always want to basically create things that when we go in and play it, we're surprised by it. So when we're not going to be able to kind of like meet that need that we've built ourselves if we don't continue to build exciting new mechanics and systems. So.
I would say there are things that we're super excited about doing that are not in Guild Wars 2 right now. But I mean, I'm not going to announce to you what those are today. Right? But of course, we're here shipping Guild Wars 2 and thinking about, what do we get to layer into the game next? And there's some awesome stuff that we're going to layer into the game next. We'll announce those at some future date.
I guess, I'm thinking more about your question. I guess, being a big player of some of the more well-known MMOs in the past, in my opinion, personal opinion, that they built a fantastic platform, but, really breaking through barriers after that has been, small incremental steps. I think, and Mo may correct me, I think it's fair to say that we don't really, we're not that interested in small incremental steps. We want to push things and challenge ourselves and learn. So yes, you can expect evolution, let's put it that way.
Okay.
It was just a little question about the books. Are you planning new novels?
So we don't have any in the works right now, but I do think that we kind of love it as a company. We love as a company to be able to keep expanding the lore. So I'm sure that kind of thing will make a recurrence.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks for
Well,
coming.
thank you guys. It's great to see you.
Thank you.